The fact that Director Mueller has supposedly concluded that he found no evidence of collusion, so he didn't find enough evidence to indicate the existence of a conspiracy at the level that you would need to bring some sort of, I guess, a federal charge. Does that mean we shouldn't have investigated it? Absolutely not. We don't start investigations driving at a conclusion. We don't consider investigations to have been a waste of time or unwarranted simply because they ended up in a place where you didn't expect them to end up. You start investigations because you have an obligation to do your job. And our job at that moment, when we have that articulable suspicion, is to conduct the investigation to ensure that we and the Justice Department, and maybe in some circumstances the world, will know if, in fact, that threat existed. And it's just as valuable to be able to say, no, it didn't. We've looked at all of these statements and actions by the president leading us up to that point when Director Comey is fired and he says all these things publicly. And it was undeniable to us that there could be a threat to national security posed by the President of the United States. That is not something that the FBI can continue to investigate. That is something that you need a special counsel to investigate. You need to bring in someone who has not been appointed by the president, someone who is independent, professional, someone whose ethics and professionalism and integrity are without question. And so we found that person in Director Mueller.
So the president believes that you played a key role in launching that special investigation, and would he be right then that this is something you thought was necessary and you helped make it happen?
He's absolutely right if he believes that. I approved the opening of that case. I did it with the knowledge of the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, and I immediately notified Congress that I had done it.
So I want to fast forward to a couple weeks ago,
okay,
when Director Mueller hands in his report. The Attorney General reviews the report and in a transmittal letter to the Congress concludes there was unable to establish collusion.
That's right.
And made no determination on obstruction of justice, which are the two main lines of inquiry. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that your concerns were overdrawn? Or put another way, has Mueller satisfied you that what you were worried about did not happen?
Well, there's a couple things to unpack there. That's kind of an oversimplification, I guess. So am I satisfied? I expect to be satisfied when I get to see the report. And I should hope that all people think about it that way. So I think it's really important to remember that we don't know yet. We understand how Attorney General Barr has characterized what's in that 400-page report, but it will be, to understand, to draw your own conclusions about it, I think you have to do that only after you see the report. The fact, if you split those two things out, the fact that Director Mueller has supposedly concluded that he found no evidence of collusion, so he didn't find enough evidence to indicate the existence of a conspiracy at the level that you would need to bring some sort of, I guess, a federal charge. Does that mean we shouldn't have investigated it? Absolutely not. We don't start investigations driving at a conclusion. We don't consider investigations to have been a waste of time or unwarranted simply because they ended up in a place where you didn't expect them to end up. You start investigations because you have an obligation to do your job. And our job at that moment, when we have that articulable suspicion, is to conduct the investigation to ensure that we and the Justice Department, and maybe in some circumstances the world, will know if, in fact, that threat existed. And it's just as valuable to be able to say, no, it didn't.
Well, let me just ask, when we talked about the Comey report during the campaign about the server, you said in hindsight it was not a good thing to have so much of the internal dirty bits, aired, dirty laundry aired because of the way it contributed to toxic atmosphere. Would that same logic not apply now? We don't want to see the contents of the report if we're satisfied that the executive summary says there was no collusion, then we don't need to see the underlying evidence?
Well, to be clear, my hindsight concerns about our decisions in July over the Clinton email case are, one, the Bureau should have probably stayed in its traditional role and allowed the Department of Justice to announce the result. And they allowed the Department of Justice to determine how deep or how many of those details and kind of dirty bits they were going to expose in the course of announcing the result. I think announcing the result and announcing why we had drawn the conclusion we did would have been essential. I think it probably just would have been better for the FBI if the department had done it. Would it have been accepted any better if DOJ had done it? I don't think so. I just would have avoided inflicting all that pain on the Bureau. And let's be honest, my job was to run and protect the Bureau. So, but now we're in a very similar situation. We're struggling with that same idea, like how much of the detail do you reveal about people who are not being charged? You know, I'm glad I'm not the Attorney General. I don't have to decide that. I do think that there is a compelling public interest in understanding what the special counsel team found in one direction or the other. Now, how much of the granularity of people's identities and things like that do you reveal? That's a sensitivity that I think DOJ is best positioned to figure out. And to be, you know, I know we're kind of flipping back and forth here, but the issue on obstruction is very different. So the case we opened on the president was predicated both on the possibility of a national security threat and the possibility that a federal crime, obstruction of justice, may have taken place. And as I have heard from the reporting and from the Attorney General's letter, Director Mueller has not drawn a conclusion on that, but presented substantial evidence around that issue. I think that's important for the American people to know and to understand as everybody makes their own evaluations about how they think the president is performing. That's what we get to do here in a democracy. And I think that's relevant, important information about not just any citizen, but the President of the United States. I think the stars are aligning in the direction of compelling public interest.